G'day guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a movie review. This movie is a comedy from Denmark, Danish language English subs, released in the year 2010, directed by Michael Norgard, and this film is called Klovn the Movie. So Klovn the Movie is based on a very popular Danish TV show of the same name. You basically got two best friends, Frank and Casper. Now Frank has a girlfriend who he's trying to impress because she's pregnant, and she believes that he doesn't have what it takes to be a good father, so he wants to prove her wrong. And then he's got his best friend Casper, who cheats on his wife at every given opportunity. So Casper is definitely a very manipulative type of man, and he bullies Frank a little bit. So Frank always does what Casper wants. So one day Casper wants to go on a weekend of sex, basically just betraying the trust of his partner, his wife. So Frank doesn't necessarily want to do this, but what the plan is that Casper's going to say it's a canoe trip. So it's going to be a weekend where the two can bond and just have a bit of fun, but ultimately it is a very secretive type of thing that they're going to be doing. So Frank, he doesn't necessarily want to do this. He sees the wrong in this, but Casper is just very, very convincing, and he absolutely just relentless in telling Frank that this is what he needs to do. So Frank comes up with an idea. Instead of having this just a sex weekend, he's going to use this to prove to his girlfriend that he has what it takes to be a father. So he takes the girlfriend's nephew, Bo, who's 12 years old. He takes him along on this boat trip. Much to the disgust of Casper, because he says that Bo's going to ruin everything. But Frank wants to use this as an opportunity to show that he can be a good father, and that he'll be a good father to his unborn child. So whether or not that is the case, that's something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Klovn. I haven't actually seen the Danish TV show. Now the Danish TV show is relatively very popular, so for that reason, being Klovn the movie, I had my hesitations coming into it, because ultimately I haven't actually seen an episode of it. So if you have seen the TV show and you want to tell me a little bit how you felt about the film, please by all means do so. But I'm actually rating this film on the film alone. And I think that if you're going to transform something into a movie, you don't need to see the overall show, because if a movie does its job, it explains everything within this actual story. And I think it did a decent job at explaining what this kind of humour was. Now this is not a Scandinavian type of deadpan humour. This is very crude humour, and it is very reminiscent of the humour of American films such as Hot Rod. You've got all that American Pie. You've got all that very crude sort of stuff. And I think that is much more appropriate for that type of comedy than it is for the standard, typical Scandinavian type of comedy. So for that reason, I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't take the very Scandinavian style, but I can appreciate the fact that they are trying something different. They're not just doing deadpan and that's all. So this one will appeal to an audience that like their humour very crude. It is very offensive, very, very provocative. So if you are very sensitive, you're going to hate this movie. And initially, for me, I thought this movie was decent. It was funny in parts, but the problem with the film is that it tries a little bit too hard to be funny. And I actually thought that this was a wannabe of a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. Now, if you've seen Larry David's Curb Your Enthusiasm, I think that's an absolutely brilliant show, because Larry David understands comedy, and he understands how to make light of something that is not supposed to be made light of. And so therefore it comes as a sort of dark, humorous kind of type, where you feel good about laughing at it because it is funny. But in this movie, the Michael Norgard takes some really provocative material and he's trying to make fun of it, but it doesn't really come across as funny, and in some instances it comes across as very irritating. So it feels like they weren't really comfortable and they weren't really sure at how to produce this really provocative material in a funny way. So I thought that in some instances it was very funny. I thought the ending was very funny, but when it doesn't try too hard, that's when it's at its funniest. But there are moments where it just exaggerates it to the point of a caricature, and you don't really care about it, and you just feel that, okay, you're trying way too hard to be offensive, and you're trying way too hard to be funny, but it's not really coming off. So it's like the guy in the party who thinks he's really funny. He tells a joke, you give him a sympathy laugh because you don't want to make him feel bad. And that's ultimately what the problem with this film is, that you're giving a lot of sympathy laughs. You're thinking to yourself, I'm feeling a little bit bad for this director and these writers, and I just have to laugh in the order to make it feel less awkward. So it's a very awkward film in all the wrong ways, because I just thought it thought of itself as a very funny film, but it doesn't come across that way because it's trying a little bit too hard. Now the acting, I thought Frank wasn't a very likeable character and Casper wasn't a very likeable character. I thought there were grounds to make this film thought-provoking, in that, Frank being this father figure that he's trying to show Bo a good time. I reckon that really could have worked, the dynamics between Frank and his girlfriend, but it never works because it's always insistent on being just a repulsive type of film. And then you've got Casper, who is this really awful man who's cheating on his wife, and then at the end there are grounds to make it sort of a thought-provoking material, and it kind of has an opportunity at further developing these two characters, but you never get the chance to really connect with them because they're doing all these horrible things, and you don't really feel like these guys are human beings. You just feel like they're caricatures put on for a comedy skit and nothing else. So you don't really get a sense of their friendship, Casper and Frank. You're constantly asking, why is Frank hanging around Casper? As I said, it's got a Larry David sort of Curb Your Enthusiasm feel to it, where it's kind of like, it feels like a documentary style of film, but as I said, it wants to be a Larry David film, Larry David sort of Curb Your Enthusiasm style of movie, but it doesn't work because it just doesn't feel like it's natural in its comedy. It feels like it's a little bit uncomfortable with what it's trying to depict. So there are scenes in the film that are way over the top. I mean, there is one scene in particular in a tent that I really didn't like. I thought that was very uncomfortable, and they just didn't handle that very well at all. But if you like your movies that are very offensive and quite extreme, then I would say definitely give Clown the movie a go. As I said, it's very sexual. Some of the jokes work and some of them don't. Majority of the jokes don't, but there are a few moments where it's not trying as hard that it actually feels as though it was worth it. But ultimately, by the end of the film, you come away thinking that, you don't really want to watch the TV show because you've seen enough. So ultimately, this was a very disappointing Scandinavian comedy, and as a result of that, I'm only going to give Clown the movie 1.5 stars. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you there.